I stood outside the house I had paid for, watching my parents hand the keys to my sister Chloe. My mom smiled widely, her face glowing with pride. "This house belongs to the family now," she announced loudly. "Chloe deserves a place to start her life." I couldn't breathe. My hands felt numb. I had been paying the mortgage for 3 years. 3 years of working overtime shifts, skipping vacations, and sacrificing everything I had built. Every single dollar that went into this house came from my bank account. I stood there frozen, unable to process what was happening in front of me. My dad wrapped his arm around Chloe's shoulders, beaming at her like she had accomplished something incredible. She hadn't done anything except exist. Meanwhile, I had worked myself to exhaustion to make this dream a reality. The sun felt hot on my face, but inside, I felt completely cold. This moment would change everything between us, though I didn't know it yet. "What do you mean?" I blurted out, my voice cracking. "I bought this house." My dad looked at me with that familiar expression, the one that made me feel small. "You're doing well, sweetheart," he said coldly. "Your sister needs help." My heart sank into my stomach. They didn't even look guilty. They didn't seem to understand what they had just done. Chloe stood between them, holding the keys like they were made of gold. I looked at my mother's face, searching for some sign of recognition, some acknowledgement of my sacrifice. But there was nothing. Only a blank stare, as if I was being unreasonable for even questioning their decision. My dad turned away from me and started walking toward the house with Chloe. He acted like the conversation was already over, like my feelings didn't matter at all. I stood there alone on the driveway, feeling like the ground was opening up beneath my feet. This wasn't the homecoming I had imagined. This was a betrayal. Chloe twirled the keys around her finger with a smirk on her face. "Don't be dramatic, Francesca," she said, laughing like it was all a joke. "You still have your fancy apartment." I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. "That apartment's rented," I said through gritted teeth. "This house is mine. I paid for every brick, every board, every nail." My sister just shrugged carelessly. "Not anymore," she said with that infuriating smile. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab those keys and throw them into the street. Chloe had always been the golden child, the one who got everything handed to her without working for it. Our parents had always favored her, but I never thought they would go this far. I never thought they would steal my house. She walked past me toward the front door, swinging the keys like she owned the world. Maybe to her, she did. She had never known what it meant to work for anything. She had never understood sacrifice. And now, she had my greatest accomplishment in her hands. I drove away from that house shaking, my vision blurred with tears. Every paycheck, every overtime shift, every moment I had given up for my family, it was all gone. I pulled over on a quiet street and let myself fall apart. I cried so hard I could barely breathe. My parents had always said, "One day, you'll be our pride." Well, I was supposed to be their pride. I was the one who worked hard, who earned scholarships, who built a successful career. And they had used me. They had taken advantage of my love and my trust. I felt like a fool who had bought her sister's dream life while destroying her own. I had given everything, and in return, I received nothing but betrayal. The unfairness of it all crashed down on me like a wave. I gripped the steering wheel and screamed, letting out months of frustration and hurt. When I finally calmed down, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to accept this injustice. I had paid for that house, and I was going to fight for what was mine. I drove back to the house that night, my anger burning hotter than my tears. I knocked on the door, and my mom answered, looking annoyed. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I want an explanation," I said firmly. My mom sighed like I was bothering her. "You're ungrateful, Francesca," she said coldly. "We raised you. You owe us." I stared at her, and something inside me broke. She actually believed what she was saying. She actually thought I owed her my house, my money, my entire life. My love had always been one-sided. I had spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, trying to be the perfect daughter, and it had never been enough. They had used my love against me. They had known I would do anything for them, and they had exploited that. I realized in that moment that my relationship with my parents was built on a foundation of lies. They didn't love me the way I loved them. They loved what I could do for them. And now that I had given them everything, they had moved on to the next person who could serve them. As I drove home that night, memories started flooding back. I remembered growing up watching my parents favor Chloe. When I got scholarships, Chloe got gifts. When I worked hard, Chloe got praised for existing. When I needed help, they told me to figure it out myself. But when Chloe needed anything, my parents moved mountains. I remembered asking my dad for help with college tuition, and he said we didn't have the money. Then, a week later, he bought Chloe a car. I remembered my mom telling me I was selfish for wanting to save money instead of giving it all to the family. But Chloe's selfishness was celebrated as independence. All of it clicked into place. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern that had been going on my entire life. My parents had trained me to sacrifice for them, and Chloe had been trained to accept those sacrifices as her birthright. I wasn't just paying for a house. I was repeating a cycle that had started decades ago. But tonight, I decided that cycle was going to end. Hey guys, before we continue, if you're loving this story, please subscribe. There's so much more to come, and these kinds of stories get even more intense. Let's keep reading together. The next morning, I sat at my desk and pulled up all my financial records. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through 3 years of mortgage payments. Every transfer, every payment, every receipt, all under my name. Not my parents' names. Not even shared ownership. Just mine. I printed out all the documents and spread them across my desk like a puzzle. The proof was undeniable. I had put down the down payment. I had signed the loan documents. I had paid every single monthly payment. This house belonged to me legally, financially, and morally. No one could dispute that. I whispered to myself, they can't erase this. The documentation was solid. The bank had records. The deed had my name. I was in control, even if I didn't feel like it yet. I started organizing the papers into folders, knowing that I might need them. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I had to do something. I wasn't going to let my parents and sister get away with this theft. They had stolen from me, and I was going to prove it to everyone. After 3 days of crying and feeling broken, I made a decision. I called a locksmith and asked if he could come to the house the next morning. He hesitated on the phone. I need to verify ownership, he said carefully. Are you the owner of the property? I smiled bitterly and said, oh, I can prove it. I emailed him copies of the deed, the mortgage documents, and my ID. An hour later, he called back and confirmed the appointment. My heart was pounding as I prepared for what came next. I knew this would start a war with my family. I knew they would be angry. I knew this would blow up in ways I couldn't predict. But I also knew it was necessary. I couldn't let them continue to treat me like I didn't matter. I couldn't let them steal from me without consequences. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed thinking about what I was about to do. By this time tomorrow, everything would change. My parents would know that I wasn't the person they could manipulate anymore. I wasn't going to be their doormat. I was going to take back control of my life, starting with taking back my house. The next morning, I arrived at the house early with the locksmith. My hands were trembling as we pulled up to the curb. Chloe opened the front door in her pajamas, looking confused. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice still sleepy. I pulled out my ID and handed it to the locksmith. Taking back what's mine? I said calmly. Chloe's face went pale. She tried to block the locksmith from entering, but I stood firm. You don't have any right to be here, I told her quietly. This is my property. The locksmith walked past her and began working on changing the locks. Chloe stood there, frozen, not sure what to do. She started texting frantically on her phone, probably calling our parents. I watched her face as the reality of the situation started to sink in. She had never imagined that I would actually do something like this. She had been so confident that she could keep the house, that I would just accept what happened and move on. But I wasn't going to accept it. I wasn't going to accept injustice anymore. Within 10 minutes, my parents rushed over to the house, driving faster than the speed limit allowed. My dad was already shouting before he even got out of the car. "You can't do this to your family," he yelled, his face red with anger. My mom was crying, which made me feel guilty for a split second. But I reminded myself that I had nothing to feel guilty about. I had done nothing wrong. "You already did," I said calmly, turning to face them. The locksmith finished his work and handed me the new keys. The locks clicked into place with a finality that made everything feel real. My parents were screaming now, demanding that I change the locks back immediately. Neighbors were starting to come out of their houses, watching the drama unfold. I could feel their eyes on us, judging the scene we were creating. My mom grabbed my arm, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to us?" she sobbed. I looked at her and felt nothing. No sadness, no guilt, no love. Just emptiness. "Because you did it to me first," I said quietly. Then I turned and walked into my house, leaving my family standing outside on the driveway where this had all started. That night, I got a call from a lawyer. It was Chloe's boyfriend's uncle, a man I had met once at a family dinner. He spoke formally and slowly, as if I was a child who needed things explained carefully. "Your parents could claim the house as a gift," he said. "They might try to argue that they intended for you to give them the house as a family present." I listened to his entire explanation and then I smiled. "That's perfect," I said. "Then I can send them an invoice." There was silence on the other end of the line. The lawyer clearly hadn't expected that response. "An invoice," he repeated uncertainly. "Yes," I said firmly. "If they claim it's a gift, then I'll treat it like a business transaction. I'll send them a bill for everything I've paid, with interest." The lawyer tried to advise me against it, but I had already made up my mind. I was done playing nice. I was done being the good daughter. If my family wanted to treat me like a business transaction, then I would give them exactly what they asked for. I spent the next day creating an official invoice. I made it look professional and formal, using a template I found online. At the top, I wrote "mortgage repayment due." I calculated everything I had paid over 3 years: mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, maintenance costs. The total came to $312,480. I attached every single receipt and bank statement as proof. At the bottom of the invoice, I wrote in bold letters, "Due in full within 30 days." Then I printed it out, put it in an envelope, and addressed it to my parents' house. Before I mailed it, I took a picture of the invoice and saved it to my phone. I had a feeling I might need it later. The next morning, I walked to the mailbox and dropped the envelope inside. My heart was racing as I watched the mail carrier pick it up. There was no going back now. In a few days, my parents would receive this invoice and realize that I was completely serious. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't something I would get over. This was real. My mom called me that evening, and she was furious. I had never heard her voice so angry. "How dare you treat us like strangers?" she screamed into the phone. "How dare you send us an invoice like we're some kind of business transaction?" I sat silently, listening to her rage. She went on and on about how ungrateful I was, how much they had sacrificed for me, how ashamed they were. Then I spoke, and my voice was so quiet she had to stop yelling to hear me. "Strangers don't steal from me," I said. Then I hung up. There was nothing else to say. I had said everything that needed to be said. The line went silent. I turned off my phone and sat in the darkness of my house, feeling the weight of what had happened. My family was gone. Not physically, but in every other way that mattered. We were broken, and I didn't know if we could ever be fixed. But I also knew that staying connected to them would have broken me even more. Sometimes, you have to burn a bridge to save yourself. Within a week, Chloe posted on social media. "My sister kicked my parents out of their own house," she wrote with crying emojis. "I can't believe she would be so heartless. This is the worst betrayal I've ever experienced." Her post got hundreds of comments and shares. I watched as her friends rushed to support her, calling me evil and cruel. My stomach twisted with anxiety. But then something unexpected happened. People started asking questions in the comments. "Wait, whose name is on the deed?" someone wrote. Who paid for the house? Asked another. What's your sister's side of the story? People wanted the full truth, not just the emotional sob story. My notifications were flooded with messages from strangers asking me to tell my side. I realized that this was my moment to speak up. Silence would make me look guilty. I needed to tell the truth before Chloe's narrative became the only story people knew. I took a deep breath and posted my response. I included screenshots of the deed showing my name as the sole owner. I included mortgage statements with my name and account number. I included bank transfers showing 3 years of payments coming from my account. I wrote a simple caption. Here's the truth. I paid for every penny of this house for 3 years. I earned the money. I signed the papers. I made the payments. When my family gave it to my sister without my permission, I took back what was legally and morally mine. That's not cruelty. That's justice. The post went viral instantly. Comments flooded in from thousands of people. Good for you, they wrote. This is amazing. Your family used you, and you stood up for yourself. People who didn't even know me were praising my courage. The comments kept coming, wave after wave of support. I felt tears running down my face, but these were different tears. These were tears of relief. I wasn't alone anymore. The entire internet had my back. My family was crumbling. My dad called me and blamed my mom for pushing me too far. My mom called me and blamed my dad for not appreciating my sacrifice. Chloe blamed everyone but herself, claiming she was the victim in all of this. The unity they had always shown to the outside world was gone. They were turning on each other, looking for someone to blame for the mess they had created. I watched from a distance as my family fell apart, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No joy, just a hollow sadness. This wasn't how I wanted things to end. I had wanted my family to understand what they had done wrong. I had wanted them to apologize and change. But instead, they were just fighting with each other, refusing to take responsibility. They were so busy blaming everyone else that they couldn't see their own faults. It was exhausting just watching them. And I realized that I couldn't fix this. I couldn't make them understand. They would have to figure it out on their own, and maybe they never would. A few days later, I got a call from my bank. The officer sounded confused and concerned. Miss Francesca, we received a request to transfer ownership of the property to your parents, she said carefully. We wanted to verify this with you before proceeding. My heart skipped a beat. My parents had actually tried to transfer ownership without my permission. They had tried to steal the house from me. Again. No, I said firmly. Do not transfer anything. I'm the only person authorized to make changes to this account. The bank officer confirmed that I was the only one with authority. You're completely in control, she assured me. No one can make any changes without your direct authorization. After we hung up, I sat in shock. My parents had actually attempted to commit fraud. They had tried to illegally transfer property that didn't belong to them. This went beyond betrayal. This was a crime. I had evidence of their attempt, and I saved everything for my records. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was protecting my legal rights. I sent my parents a final letter. It was professional and businesslike, with no room for misinterpretation. You have 7 days to vacate the property, I wrote. After that date, rent will be due at $2,000 per month. This is non-negotiable. I sent it through certified mail, so they couldn't claim they never received it. My dad called me immediately, his voice dripping with anger. You can't do this, he said. We're your parents. You owe us. I don't owe you anything, I replied. I paid my debt to you a long time ago. Now you're going to pay me back. He hung up without another word. I wasn't sure if my parents actually believed I would enforce the rent, but I knew I would. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't going to back down. I meant every word I had written. The 7-day deadline was approaching, and I was prepared for whatever came next. I called a lawyer and made sure I had all the legal documentation I needed to proceed with an eviction, if necessary. When the 7 days were over, Chloe still hadn't left the house. She was stubborn and refused to accept that I had won. I filed an official eviction notice and called the police for a trespassing complaint. When the officer arrived at the house, Chloe finally understood that this was real. She opened the door in a state of panic, her smirk completely gone. The officer looked at me, then at Chloe. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "you're trespassing. The house isn't yours. You need to leave immediately." Chloe's face went white. She had never really believed I would go through with this. She had thought I was bluffing, that I would eventually give in because that's what I had always done. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had changed. I was willing to do whatever it took to protect what was mine. My parents packed up their belongings and left within the hour. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't apologize. They just left, taking their anger and their entitlement with them. And I watched them go, feeling absolutely nothing. The day after they left, I walked through my house alone. The silence was beautiful. There was no yelling, no drama, no guilt hanging over my head. Just peace. I walked through each room slowly, letting myself really see the house for the first time. I stood in the living room and remembered all the times I had imagined my family sitting here together, happy and grateful. That dream was gone, but I was okay with that. I had a new dream now. This house was mine. Not my parents', not my sister's, just mine. I sat down on the floor in the middle of the living room and just breathed. I thought about everything I had been through to get here. The sacrifice, the betrayal, the anger, the pain. But I had come out the other side. I had survived. And more than that, I had won. I finally smiled, a real smile that came from deep inside my soul. This was my victory. This was my life. And I was going to make sure I never gave it away again. Weeks passed, and I started to settle into my new life.
My house was my sanctuary now.
I had changed all the locks and updated the security system. No one could get in without my permission. One day, I received a letter in the mail from my dad. My hands shook as I opened it. He had written about how he didn't realize how much I had done for the family. He said he had always been proud of me but jealous of my success. He asked for forgiveness and said he wanted to start over. I read the letter once, and then I shredded it.
Some things couldn't be repaired.
Some wounds were too deep. I understood that my dad was trying to reach out, but it was too little too late. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. There was no going back. Chloe called me about a month later. Her voice was different, softer, less confident. "Can we start over?" she asked hesitantly. "I need a place to stay. Can I rent from you?" I actually laughed out loud. The audacity. She had stolen my house, lived in it without permission, and now she wanted to rent it from me like nothing had ever happened. "Sure," I said. "I'll send you the rental agreement. The rent is $2,000 per month, due on the first of every month. There's also a security deposit of $5,000. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Chloe hung up. I never heard from her again. I made some changes to my house. I hired a contractor to make renovations, updating the kitchen and the bathrooms. I replaced the last old lock with a brand new electronic system that I controlled completely. I changed the security code and added cameras to every corner of the property. This house wasn't just my home anymore. It was my fortress. It was a symbol of my independence and my strength. I had paid for this house with my hard work and sacrifice. Now I was making it exactly the way I wanted it. I adopted a rescue dog named Max, a golden retriever who had been abandoned by his previous owners. I understood what that felt like. We were the same, him and me. We had both been betrayed and left behind. But now we had each other. I felt stronger than I ever had in my entire life. Several months after my family left, I made a major financial decision. I refinanced a mortgage and added my name to all the documents, making absolutely sure that there was no way anyone could ever challenge my ownership. I set up a trust and made plans for the future. I was no longer living day to day, uncertain about what would happen next. I had a plan. I had security. My parents ended up moving to a small apartment across town, and I heard through the grapevine that they were struggling financially. Part of me wanted to help them, but I had learned the hard way that helping them only meant hurting myself. My mom texted me once, just one message. "We miss you." I stared at that message for a long time, my finger hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to respond. I wanted to tell her that I missed them too. But in the end, I didn't reply. Some silences say more than words ever could. Months later, I was sitting in my house, working on my laptop, when I decided to post about my experience online. I wrote, "I paid for my parents' dream house. They gave the key to my sister. So I mailed them the bill." I included the story, not in a mean way, but in a way that was honest and real. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I was looking for understanding. The post went viral instantly. The comments exploded. "Queen behavior," people wrote. "This is justice. You're an inspiration." Strangers from around the world were telling me that my story had helped them. Some people were finding the courage to set boundaries with their own families. Others were learning that they didn't have to accept mistreatment from the people they loved. I closed my laptop and sat in the quiet of my house, with Max curled up beside me. I whispered to myself, "Paid in full. Every way that matters." And I meant it. I had paid the price. I had earned my peace. I had finally taken my life back. And no one would ever take that away from me again. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and finding your power. Your support means everything. Thank you for watching.